Never in my wildest dreams did I think this would be my life.
Welcome to Human Evolution, the podcast where growth gets real, patterns get exposed, and things start to look a little different. I'm Jodie Tala, integrative neuroregulation coach and the founder of MindDrop. This is where we have the conversations that don't always get said out loud, unpacking emotional regulation, neuroscience, and the patterns shaping how you think, feel, and show up in the world, and what it really takes to change. For the self-aware, heart-led humans and high performers who are done running on autopilot and ready to live life on purpose. Let's go.
I want to tell you about two people. The first one had it all mapped out. She could see the life that she wanted and she could feel like it was already hers and talk about it like it was on the way. And it came. The vision board on the wall, the whole thing, it showed up. Ask her how she did it and she'll tell you that she pictured it, believed in it, and then called it into her life. The second person will just shake her head and say, I never in my wildest dreams thought this would be my life. There was no vision board or big dream. If you told her years ago where she would end up, she probably would have laughed at you because she didn't see it coming. She just kept taking these small, steady steps, and somewhere along the way, she became someone who could actually hold this new thing. Two completely different stories. One saw it, one never did. So my question is what if they were both running the same engine underneath and the seeing was only one way of getting that engine started? So last episode, we cleaned up the way that we use the word manifestation. So manifestation is the outcome. It's the thing that has become manifest in your life. Something that once existed as a desire, as an idea or a thought or a possibility is now part of your lived reality. And we explored one pathway into that, which was desire, vision, intention, goals, action, leading to the outcome of manifestation. This pathway works beautifully for some people. They can properly see what they want before it exists, and they can picture the business or the relationship in the house, the career or the versions of themselves that they're becoming. They can completely emotionally connect with it before there's any physical evidence that it's theirs to have. They borrow belief from that vision. And the picture helps them choose a direction, make decisions, and begin moving towards something that doesn't actually exist in their world yet. Then there's the second person, and they got somewhere remarkable, and it's almost like they're a bit embarrassed about how it happened because it never felt like a grand plan. There was no movement where they sat down and pictured the whole life. It was just they did the next thing and then the next thing, and they kept showing up when it was boring, and they learned something from it, and they handled something that they didn't think that they could handle, and they followed an opportunity. They started solving problems, and it just kept on going. So they met someone who introduced them to a world that they didn't even know existed, or one step opened the next door and the next step. And one day they looked around and they realized that they were living the kind of life that other people were putting on their vision boards, but they stumbled into it. Except they kind of didn't, not really. Because when you look at what actually happened, they were taking action the entire time. They were learning, adjusting, and gathering evidence, and they were developing skills and judgments and standards and relationships, and their capacity was expanding. Their beliefs were changing. Their understanding of what was possible changed. And by the time the larger life arrived, they'd become someone who could actually sit and hold what that meant. So I don't think these are two permanent types of people. They're two different starting pathways. You might be the visionary in your business and completely evidence-led in your relationships. Or you might have a clear vision of your family life whilst your career develops through opportunities that you could never have planned for or pictured happening. You can move between both pathways in different parts of your life, but there is a real difference in where the belief comes from at the beginning. So some people borrow belief from vision, and other people build belief from evidence. So the visionary says, I can see where I'm going, so I'm willing to begin. But the evidence-led person says, I can't see the whole thing, but I can do this next piece. And then they do it. And maybe it works. Maybe they discover they're more capable than what they thought. Or maybe another person responds positively towards them, or they've earned their first bit of money from it. Maybe the attempt goes absolutely terrible, but they survive it and they learn something in that process and that realize that failure wasn't actually the ending they thought it would be. And now they have new evidence. And the evidence changes what they believe they might be capable of. And that belief makes a slightly larger step possible. And that larger step gives new information, new skills, and new evidence. And the sense of what life could become expands as it's already moving. They didn't have to believe first and then begin. They kind of started and then the belief caught up. No wonder that creating a vision board and starting at that finished outcome and waiting to feel like it was already theirs wasn't producing much for this type of person in this situation. They were trying to use a belief-first process when their belief is actually built through experience. And I think this is why two people can use the exact same manifestation tool and come away with like completely different opinions about whether or not it works. One person takes themselves into the future, sees the outcome is already done, feels it in their body, and something clicks. They come back into the present, more focused, more certain, and more willing and driven to actually move. The other person does exactly the same exercise and spends 20 minutes feeling like they're playing make-believe. Then nothing changes, and eventually they decide that manifestation is a load of crap. Maybe the tool wasn't actually rubbish. Maybe it just wasn't the tool that they needed to build belief at that point. So a tool can be powerful without being universally powerful. For some people, they need to see it before they begin, and for others, they need to begin before they can see it. The pictures may be absolutely beautiful, and they may have everything they've ever wanted on that board, but they didn't yet have a believable bridge between this is where I am now and this is my life. They needed to move before they could actually see that and feel it and connect in with it. And sometimes that gap is bigger than a lack of evidence. So the goal can run directly into beliefs, values, and identity rules that are already sitting underneath within our unconscious mind. So the conscious mind says, hey, I am visible, successful business owner making $10,000 per month. We're going to keep running with that one. And the operating system runs this background check and it goes, no, you're not. People like us don't do that. Or being visible gets you criticized, or money changes people, or I've never had that much money before and I won't. Or success will cost you your relationships, or you say you want freedom, but this version of success looks like more responsibility. And then the OS goes, well, this doesn't match everything we currently know to be true. And that's why a present tense statement can actually feel less like inspiration and more like you're lying to yourself. What it's usually representing is that there's something underneath it that's conflicting with the statement. It doesn't mean that that goal is wrong, but maybe the belief just hasn't caught up yet. Or maybe the person wants the outcome but actually fears what it will require from them. Or maybe the goal is fighting with another value that they're holding. And maybe this isn't really their goal to begin with at all. Or maybe the finished picture is so far beyond their current evidence that they hold that their nervous system and their mind has nothing believable to connect it to yet. This doesn't mean they have to abandon that possibility, but it may mean that they need a different entry point. So instead of trying to force this full belief in the ending, they begin by creating evidence around that next little step. Psychologist Albert Bandura called the belief that you can organize and carry out of the actions required in a situation self-efficacy. One of the strongest sources of self-efficacy is mastery experience. Actually doing something, developing that competence, and then seeing evidence that your behavior can affect what happens next. Encouragement can help, and seeing somebody else do it can also help. It can provide a place that you can model from. But there's something particularly really powerful about having your own evidence. Being able to know that I handled that. I learned how to do that. I said I would do it and I followed through. I got it wrong, adjusted and tried again. And now failure doesn't actually feel like failure. It just feels like information that I learned from. So I didn't know what I was doing 6 months ago, but now I know more. Those experiences begin changing the story that you have about your own capability. They're not evidence that you can control every outcome though, but they are evidence that you can participate and learn and respond and adapt and pivot and become more effective than where you were before. And that creates a different kind of belief. It isn't borrowed from an imaginary future that you're visioning. It's been built through contact with reality. So here's where the conversation gets really interesting, because you put the visionary and the evidence-led person side by side, right? So camp 1 is a visionary and camp 2 is the evidence-led. Camp 2 took the steps and became someone new along the way. That part's obvious. They'll usually tell you that themselves. But now go back to camp 1, the visionary, the one who saw it, felt it, made it happen. And ask them what they actually did between the vision and the results. They took steps too. They developed skills. They changed their behavior. They made decisions the previous version of themselves probably wouldn't have made. They tolerated the uncertainty, so they had that capacity and that range. They adjusted when things didn't work. They built relationships and gathered information and became more capable of holding what that picture was. So the action is in both. The evidence is within both of them. They're both doing the same thing. The internal change, the becoming, it's both there in both parts, in both camps. The difference is how they got the engine started. Like I said before, one borrowed enough belief from the future to begin with, and the other acted with whatever belief that they had available and then built more from the evidence along the way. Vision wasn't the engine. For one of them, it was like the ignition. Once both are moving, though, the process begins to converge. The action creates the feedback. That feedback creates the learning. The learning changes capability. And that capability gives the operating system new evidence about who you are and what you can handle and hold and sit with. And your beliefs start beginning to change through that experience. The capacity expands. You take another action from a slightly different version of yourself, and then you repeat it. For true manifestation to occur, both of these people are changing internally and externally. They're not sitting completely unchanged or on idle while a new life just arrives around them. They're altering what they believe is possible, and then they're changing how they behave. And they are developing skills, standards, and relationships required. They're expanding their capacity to tolerate the uncertainty, the responsibility, visibility, or discomfort that's attached to the result. And they are becoming someone capable of sustaining what they actually create. And I think that's one of the bits that we don't talk about often enough in the manifestation process, because getting something and being able to hold it is not the same thing. You can create like a burst of revenue without having the systems, identity, or capacity to sustain it, though. You can enter a healthy relationship and still struggle to receive the consistency because chaos is what actually feels familiar and starts to leak through. You can get the opportunity and then find that visibility attached to it really overwhelms you. So you can reach the goal and pull yourself backwards because the external result has moved faster than the rest of you. So your internal world is really important here because your beliefs and your values and your identity, it all matters and it all adds up to how you can bring this manifestation into your life. So nervous system capacity matters and the action that you take does as well. Both of these pathways needs those things regardless of whether the person saw the outcome at the beginning or not. There is another reason the second person may not have been able to imagine the life. Psychologists Hazel Marcus and Paula Nurius called this idea possible selves. This is where the versions of ourselves we imagine we might become, want to become, or we're afraid of becoming. And those imagined versions of us can give us the motivation and direction, but they sort of don't appear from nowhere. What we can imagine is shaped by what we've experienced, what we've seen, the people that we know and the environments we've lived in, and the possibilities that we have been exposed to. So when somebody says, I never could have imagined this life, sometimes they do mean that literally, but an earlier version of them didn't have those reference points. They hadn't met those people yet. They didn't know that the industry existed and they hadn't developed the skill. And maybe they'd never earned that amount of money, experienced that kind of relationship, or seen somebody in their background build something similar. Their current life sat outside the collection of futures that they could realistically picture from where they stood. So I feel we need to be careful about looking back and rewriting the story as though they secretly knew all along, because maybe they genuinely didn't. Maybe the future only became visible after that experience kind of expanded that map. There is an entrepreneurship theory that fits this beautifully. Researcher Sarasvathy studied how expert entrepreneurs made decisions when the future is uncertain. So traditional approach begins with the defined outcome. You choose the destination, work backwards. I like to call that backward chaining, gather the resources and build a plan. That looks a lot like the vision-led pathway. But experienced entrepreneurs also use another kind of logic called effectuation. So instead of beginning with, what exact future am I going to create? They begin with, who am I? What do I know? Who do I know? What can I do with what's available to me right now? Then they take action, bring other people into the process and respond to anything that comes up, surprises or what have you, and allow the destination to develop through what actually happens. They don't need to predict the final outcome before beginning. They work with the resources and the skills and relationships and opportunities that are currently in their hands. And that's very close to what we see in the evidence-led pathway. The person didn't begin with the final manifestation in mind or the vision board and the fancy pictures. They began with what was available. So maybe they were good at explaining something, or maybe a friend asked for help and maybe they took a course or posted something online and accepted an opportunity or solved one problem really, really well. And then that one client that they helped became two, or that role led to another role, or one skill made the larger project possible for them to do. And they noticed what worked and responded to what didn't and then made adjustments accordingly. And the destination formed through that participation. Now, it's not about glorifying action for action's sake though, because moving constantly without reflection or planning does not automatically create anything useful and sometimes can keep you spinning in the same space. So not every opportunity deserves a yes, and not every small step is actually moving you towards a life that actually suits you. Otherwise, most of us would be somewhere that we want to be by now. Action can give you uncomfortable evidence as well. It can show you that the idea doesn't actually work, or that you don't really like the work that you're doing, or the opportunity costs more than it actually gives you. That the thing that you were chasing sometimes because it looked impressive, not because it actually aligned with what you value. And all of that information is going to help you and it matters, but the action put you in contact with that reality. It replaces some of the assumptions with data. When you learn what fits and what doesn't, where your strengths are and what needs work and what you want now that you know more than you did at the beginning. The evidence-led pathway isn't take one tiny step, become wildly confident and accidentally build an empire. It's a little messier than that, because that action creates the feedback and the feedback creates that learning. That learning builds that capability, and that capability changes what feels possible. There's the feeling part attached to it, right? Then you take another action with more information than you had before. You've got more certainty. And over time, those ordinary steps, they start to compound. And the person that's taking them changes along the way, because the person trying to imagine life at the beginning was not yet the person living it at the end. They hadn't had the conversations and solved the problems or navigated those setbacks. They hadn't built the networks and the emotional capacity, the self-trust or the judgment or discernment, should I say, required to manage what they could eventually create. The final life, which they end up getting anyway, but it may have felt genuinely too large for their earlier identity and context to hold as a believable possibility. But the process grew alongside that result. They didn't wait to become the perfect version of themselves before starting. The version that was capable of holding more was developed through the trying and the learning and the mistakes and the recovering and the adjusting and all the continuing, that continuity being consistent. So can you manifest something you never imagined? If manifestation is the outcome that has become real in your life, then yes. And we don't need to retrofit a secret vision onto the story to make it count like it means something. Maybe the manifestation emerged through the action before there was ever a full vision attached to it. So if you're listening to this and you don't have a huge vision, I don't think the answer is to sit there forcing yourself to invent one or focus on a vision board. You don't need to manufacture a 10-year plan because somebody online told you successful people wake up at 5 a.m. and visualize their future yacht or Lamborghini. Whatever it might be. Start closer. What do you already know? What can you already do? What problem is in front of you that you might be able to solve for somebody? What are you curious enough to explore? Who could you speak to? What is one action that could give you some new information? You're not trying to identify the move that guarantees your entire future here. You're trying to choose something that's useful enough to expand the current map that you have. So that next step that creates a result, or it creates evidence that you're more capable than what you thought. The step doesn't need to deliver the whole manifestation now, but it needs to put you in contact with something that you can't learn by standing still. And then I want you to pay attention and let reality answer you. What worked? What felt right? What did you learn? What became possible because you actually took that step? What can you see now that you couldn't see before? That is how the evidence-led pathway begins to open. It's not with complete belief or vision of things, but it's with participation. Some people see the future and grow into it. Other people start growing and then the future comes into view as they go. One borrows belief from vision. The other borrows belief from evidence. But underneath, both of them are taking action. Both are gathering new information and changing what they believe is possible. Both are expanding their capacity and becoming able to hold something that didn't exist in their lives beforehand. Their internal world is changing just as much as their external. So if you can see the future, let the vision help you begin. But if you can't, and if that feels challenging or hard, then take the next small step that gives you something real to work with. You don't always have to believe before you begin. Sometimes beginning is how belief actually gets built. So the next episode in this series, we're going to stay with this conversation, because what happens when you do have the vision and you do want it, and then some part of you still calls BS? That's where we're going to go and explore next and unpack it. See you there. Hey, my beautiful friend. Thanks for hanging out and listening to today's episode. If you want to keep the momentum going, head over to minddrophq.com/podcast. It's where all the tools, resources, and gold from the show are kept, so your growth doesn't stop when the episode ends. If this episode sparks something in you, share it with a friend or someone who needs to hear this. The more people having these conversations, the bigger the ripple we create. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. It really means the world. Until next time, keep being your gorgeous, unstoppable self.